Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving deep into the 1996 triple homicide of Tangi Jackson, Tamika Black, and Michonne Chin.
Three young women.
Yeah, and you shared Anatomy of Murder with us, and it's just got all those twists and turns like a true crime thriller.
Yeah, it's a fascinating case.
So let's get right into it. January 27th, 1996, a deserted stretch of road in a national wildlife refuge near Bowie State University in Maryland.
You really set the scene well.
3 young women are found murdered. It's just a scene that immediately grips you and leaves you with a lot of questions.
And what's so interesting right off the bat is that it's on federal land.
Oh, right.
Which means the U.S. Park Police are the ones in charge. They usually deal with things like park vandalism, not, these really complex homicide investigations.
Yeah, so you can already sense that this investigation is going to be unique.
Yeah.
And the podcast really emphasizes that initial scramble. The police are sifting through limited clues, and then they find a note in Tangi's purse. It's got the name, bones and address, and a license plate number. On the surface, it seems like a solid lead, right? But you're shaking your head. What's the catch?
So you see, that's where experience really comes in. When you've been in the field long enough, you develop a sense of, what's typical and what's not.
Yeah.
And that license plate number right alongside a name and address.
It seems almost too easy.
It's like a flashing neon sign. It just feels too convenient, too staged.
Yeah.
It could be genuine, but it could also be misdirection.
A red herring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Either way, it's a red flag. It raises more questions than it answers.
So following this possibly staged lead, the police track down Dustin Higgs.
Yeah, Dustin Higgs.
He admits to knowing Tangi, but claims he was with his girlfriend all night. So case closed, right?
Not so fast.
Yeah.
Alibis. They're the bread and butter of criminal investigations, but they're only as strong as their weakest link. And in this case, that alibi takes a dramatic hit from a completely unexpected source.
The drug charges. It's like something out of a movie. A search warrant for drug offenses, totally unrelated to the murders, throws Higgs's entire alibi into question.
Right.
And what do they find? Weapons, including a .38 caliber firearm, the same caliber used in the murders.
It's a wild turn of events, isn't it?
Yeah.
What this shows us, and I think what so many people misunderstand about these investigations, is that sometimes the most critical breakthroughs come from these seemingly unrelated events.
That's so interesting.
This drug bust, it was a lucky break, sure, but it also highlights how important that meticulous evidence gathering is. Every detail matters.
You never know what's going to be important.
Right? That seemingly, random search warrant blew a hole in Higgs' alibi and really pushed the homicide investigation in a whole new direction.
And to make matters even more suspicious, Higgs's girlfriend, Phyllis Smith, she changes her statement.
Phyllis.
Suddenly, Higgs is only accounted for until 5:00 a.m. on the morning of the murders. It keeps getting more suspicious.
Now, despite all this, the .38 caliber bullet that was found at the scene, it couldn't be definitively matched to Higgs's gun.
Oh, really?
It's a setback for sure,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean the case is cold.
Okay.
This actually brings us to another really key element of complex investigations.
I think I know where you're going with this. The FBI's Safe Streets Task Force.
You got it.
It's like assembling this dream team of investigators with all their combined resources and expertise.
Exactly. And one player on this team really stands out. This is where Ted Jones enters the picture.
Ted Jones.
A veteran Maryland state trooper. He's got a knack for undercover work. And his target? Wallace Haynes, an associate of Higgs, and a local marijuana dealer.
Okay, so here's where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
To get Haynes' fingerprints, Jones goes undercover at a car dealership.
At a car dealership.
The plan, lure Haynes in with the promise of his hard license plates for a car he bought using a stolen identity and a bad check.
Oh, wow.
It's brilliant.
What's so captivating about Jones's approach is that it's not just about the technicalities. It's about understanding human nature. He's not just a cop. He's a bit of a psychologist.
Yeah.
He creates a scenario that plays on Haynes's desires and his vulnerabilities.
It's a high-stakes gamble.
It is. And Jones, he walks that tightrope beautifully.
Except Haynes doesn't quite take the bait.
Oh, no.
During the surveillance, he manages to shake their tail.
Wow.
I was on the edge of my seat during that part.
It goes to show that even the best laid plans can go astray. Right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, good investigators. They're adaptable. They have backup plans. And while losing Haynes was a setback, it wasn't the end of the road.
Because the fingerprints they got from the car dealership still led them straight to Haynes' apartment. Even though they didn't find the murder weapon, they gathered enough evidence to arrest both Haynes and his driver, Victor Gloria.
Sometimes it's not about that one smoking gun.
Right.
It's about that slow and steady accumulation of evidence. Fingerprints, a stolen identity, a bad check. These seemingly insignificant details,
They all add up.
they all start to fit together to tell the story.
And then comes the moment that cracked the whole case wide open. Picture this. Ted Jones runs into Gloria at the FBI building.
No way.
He pretends to recognize Gloria from a previous job at a car dealership, and Gloria, thinking Jones is an old pal, confesses to his role in the murders. Talk about a lucky break and some quick thinking.
This is where Jones's expertise in building rapport really shines. He understands that trust is a powerful tool, and he uses it masterfully. This chance encounter, coupled with his improvisational skills, leads to a confession that unlocks the entire case. It's remarkable how human connection can sometimes be the key to solving even the most complex crimes.
So Gloria spills the beans. His confession reveals the horrifying events of that night. He tells them Higgs lured the women to his apartment under false pretenses. A fight broke out between Higgs and Tangi threatened to expose him before leaving.
Uh-oh.
Higgs, enraged and fearing retaliation, chases them down and orders Haynes to shoot them.
It's chilling to think about how quickly things can escalate, how anger and fear can drive people to commit unimaginable acts.
It really is.
But what's equally important here is that Gloria's confession, detailed as it is, isn't taken at face value.
Right, of course.
Investigators meticulously corroborate his account with the physical evidence and witness statements. They build a really solid case that holds up in court.
And ultimately, justice is served. All three men involved are convicted. Gloria receives a lighter sentence for his cooperation. Haynes receives life without parole plus 45 years. And Dustin Higgs is handed the first federal death sentence in Maryland's history.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the face of such horrific crimes, the justice system, however imperfect it may be, can work. This case is a testament to the tireless efforts of those investigators, the importance of meticulous evidence gathering, and the impact of strategic collaboration between agencies.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive, and it leaves me with a lot to think about. What stood out to you the most from this part of the story? What surprised you? Or what are you still kind of grappling with?
You know what I find most fascinating is how this case dismantles the myth of the smoking gun. There wasn't one piece of evidence that sealed the deal. It was the accumulation of these seemingly insignificant details, the fingerprints, the stolen identity, the bad check that ultimately led to the truth. It's a powerful reminder that the devil is in the details.
That's a great point, and it makes you wonder, what are the bigger implications here? What about the victims' families? The impact on the community? The questions this case raises about our society as a whole, those are all things we'll need to explore further. We left off with the convictions of Higgs Haynes and Gloria Justice served right. But, as we delve deeper into this case, I keep coming back to the victims, Tanji Tamika and Mishan. Their stories deserve more than just a footnote in this whole ordeal.
You're absolutely right. It's easy to get caught up in the procedural details of an investigation, the twists and turns, the forensic evidence. But at the heart of it all, there are 3 young lives that were tragically cut short.
The podcast mentions that all 3 women worked with children in some capacity.
Yes, and it's a detail that really resonated with me. Tanji worked at a high school. Tamika was a teacher's aide, and Mishan worked with a children's choir. Think about the ripple effect of their loss, the countless young lives they touched, the potential they had to shape future generations. It's a profound loss that extends far beyond their immediate families and friends.
It's heartbreaking to think about the dreams they had, the futures they envisioned, and all of that was stolen from them in a single night. It makes me wonder about the emotional toll on their loved ones. The grief, the anger, the unanswered questions.
Exactly. And while the legal system focuses on punishment and accountability, the victims' families are left to grapple with the emotional aftermath. They face a lifetime of what-ifs and could-have-beens. The trial and the convictions might bring a sense of closure, but the healing process is a long and winding road.
It makes you realize that justice is a complex concept. It's more than just convictions. It's about acknowledging the pain and suffering that was caused, supporting the victims' families, and working towards preventing such tragedies from happening again.
Absolutely. And while we can't bring back Tanji, Tamika, and Mishan, we can honor their memory by working towards a society where violence is not the answer, where young lives are nurtured and valued, and where everyone has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Switching gears a bit, you mentioned earlier the importance of forensic evidence in this case. Can you elaborate on that a bit? While the .38 caliber bullet couldn't be definitively linked to Higgs's gun, there had to be other forensic evidence that played a role, right?
Oh, absolutely. While that one piece of evidence wasn't conclusive on its own, the absence of a smoking gun doesn't mean that the forensic science was lacking. In fact, it was the meticulous collection and analysis of other seemingly minor details that built a really rock-solid case.
Like what kind of details are we talking about?
Well, let's start with that note we discussed earlier. The one found in Tangi's purse with bones, the address, and the license plate number. That note in itself wasn't direct evidence of the crime, but it provided a crucial link to Dustin Higgs.
Right. It was that initial red flag that pointed the investigation in his direction.
Exactly. But the real power of forensic science lies in its ability to corroborate stories, to weave together a narrative from these seemingly disparate threads. Remember Gloria's confession.
The one he gave to Jones pretending to be an old acquaintance, it felt like a scene ripped from a spy novel.
It was a remarkable turn of events, but confessions, even detailed ones, need to be scrutinized. That's where forensic evidence comes in. For example, Gloria described the location where they disposed of the murder weapon, the Anacostia River.
And they weren't able to recover the gun, right?
Correct. While divers extensively searched the river, the weapon was never found. But the fact that Gloria knew this detail, a detail that wasn't publicly known, added a significant layer of credibility to his confession. It suggested he wasn't fabricating his story. He was there.
It makes you realize that even in the absence of a physical weapon, the details, the corroboration, the forensic analysis, all of these things can paint a clear picture of what happened.
Precisely. And it's not just about the big dramatic evidence. It's about the fingerprints, the tire tracks, the fibers, the DNA, all of these seemingly insignificant traces that when analyzed meticulously can tell a story. In this case, those small details, coupled with Gloria's detailed confession, built a compelling case that ultimately led to the convictions.
It's amazing to think how these tiny pieces of evidence can hold so much weight in a court of law.
It really is. And this case is a perfect illustration of how those seemingly small details analyzed through the lens of forensic science can have a monumental impact on the pursuit of justice. They are the silent witnesses, the whispers of truth, that help us piece together the puzzle of the past.
Okay, so we've talked about the victims, the emotional toll, the weight of the forensic evidence, but there's still one piece of the puzzle I'm really curious about: the psychology of the perpetrators. What drove them to commit such a horrific act? Were there any warning signs, any red flags that were missed?
That's a great point. We can't just focus on the what of this case. We need to understand the why. And that takes us into the realm of human behavior, motivation, and yes, even the darkness that can reside within individuals.
So let's start with Dustin Higgs. Gloria's confession paints him as the mastermind, enraged by Tangi's threat to expose him. But what kind of person reacts to a threat with such extreme violence?
Well, it's important to remember that we can't diagnose anyone from afar, especially not based solely on secondhand accounts. But we can analyze the information we have and look for patterns, risk factors, and potential explanations. In Higgs's case, his actions suggest impulsivity, a volatile temper, and most disturbingly, a complete lack of empathy. He saw the women as obstacles to be removed, not as human beings deserving of respect and dignity.
That's a chilling thought, but it makes you wonder what kind of life experiences led him to that point. Was it his involvement in drug dealing? Was it something deeper, something rooted in his past?
Those are all valid questions, and they highlight the importance of understanding the context of an individual's life. We can't simply label someone as evil and move on. We need to ask ourselves, what factors contributed to their choices? What were their formative experiences? Were there missed opportunities for intervention?
It's about looking beyond the surface and trying to understand the complexities of human behavior, even when those behaviors are horrific.
Exactly. And it's not about excusing their actions. It's about seeking a deeper understanding so we can hopefully prevent future tragedies.
Oh, yeah.
Now, when we look at Wallace Haynes, the one who actually pulled the trigger, a different set of questions arise. He was a known drug dealer, which already suggests a certain disregard for the law. But what made him comply with Higgs's order to kill?
It's almost unfathomable to think that someone could be so easily persuaded to take another person's life.
It's a chilling example of the power dynamics that can exist within criminal networks. Higgs, we know, was a volatile and dominant personality. He likely exerted a strong influence over Haynes, who may have been motivated by a misplaced sense of loyalty, fear of reprisal, or even a warped sense of duty.
It makes you realize that criminal organizations are often built on fear and intimidation. They create a culture where violence becomes normalized, where obedience is paramount, and where dissent is met with swift and brutal consequences.
That's a crucial point. Understanding these group dynamics is essential in combating organized crime. It's not just about catching the individual perpetrators, it's about dismantling the systems that enable and perpetuate violence.
And then there's Victor Gloria, the driver. He confessed he cooperated with the authorities, but he was still complicit in the crime. How do we make sense of his role in all of this?
Gloria's case is particularly intriguing. He was in many ways the outsider in this group. He wasn't the mastermind, he wasn't the trigger man, but he was there. He drove the car, he witnessed the murders, and he participated in the cover-up. His confession suggests a degree of remorse, a desire to atone for his actions.
He was the only one who seemed to show any genuine regret.
It's possible he was less deeply entrenched in the criminal lifestyle than Higgs and Haynes. Perhaps he was drawn in through his association with Haynes, or maybe he saw this as a quick way to make money, not fully grasping the potential consequences of his actions. Whatever his motivations, witnessing the brutal murders firsthand seems to have had a profound impact on him.
Yeah, right.
It shook him to his core and ultimately led him to cooperate with the authorities.
It's a reminder that even within a group, individuals can have varying levels of culpability, different motivations, and unique responses to trauma.
Absolutely. And while Gloria's cooperation was instrumental in bringing the perpetrators to justice, it doesn't absolve him of responsibility for his role in this tragedy.
This case really is a complex tapestry of human behavior, with threads of anger, fear, loyalty, and ultimately regret.
It's a stark reminder that violence is rarely a simple equation. It's often a confluence of individual factors, social influences, and situational triggers. And while we may never fully understand what drove these men to commit such a horrific act, by exploring their motivations, we can start to unravel the complexities of human behavior and hopefully work towards preventing future tragedies.
I think that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've explored the impact on the victims' families, the significance of forensic science, and the psychology of the perpetrators. But there's one final aspect I want to touch on in our next session: the broader societal implications of this case. What can we learn from this tragedy? How can we create a world where such senseless acts of violence are less likely to occur? Those are the questions we'll be tackling in the final part of our deep dive. We've spent the last two parts of this deep dive, really dissecting this case, examining the evidence, the psychology of the perpetrators, and even the lasting impact on the victims' families and the community. But what I'm finding particularly thought-provoking is, what can we learn from all of this? This wasn't just some random act of violence. It was a culmination of choices, circumstances, and maybe even some societal failures.
That's a really powerful observation. And it's a question that lingers long after the verdicts are read and the sentences are handed down. This case, as tragic as it is, offers a unique opportunity for reflection. Can we identify those cracks in the system, the warning signs that were missed, the societal factors that contributed to this tragedy? And more importantly, can we use this knowledge to prevent future violence?
So where do we even begin? We've talked about Higgs's impulsivity, Haynes's susceptibility to manipulation, and Gloria's, questionable choices. But how do we translate those individual factors into actionable steps for prevention?
It starts with awareness. We need to educate ourselves, our families, our communities about the warning signs of potential violence. Aggression, substance abuse, criminal involvement. These aren't just isolated behaviors. They can be indicators of a much deeper problem.
So it's not about profiling or jumping to conclusions, but about recognizing patterns and offering support before things escalate.
Exactly. Early intervention is key. We need to create environments where people feel safe, seeking help, where mental health issues are addressed, and where conflict resolution skills are taught and practiced.
It's about shifting our mindset from reaction to prevention, from punishment to rehabilitation.
And it's about understanding that violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's often the result of really complex social and economic factors. Poverty, lack of opportunity, exposure to violence, these all create breeding grounds for crime.
So it's not just about addressing individual behavior. It's about tackling these systemic issues, right? Investing in education, creating job opportunities, strengthening community support systems. Those are all crucial pieces of the puzzle.
Absolutely. We need to create communities where everyone feels valued, where young people have positive role models and opportunities to thrive, and where violence is simply not seen as an acceptable solution to conflict.
It's about breaking the cycle, creating a culture of respect and empathy.
And it's about accountability. Holding perpetrators responsible for their actions is essential, but so is creating a system that offers opportunities for rehabilitation and reintegration.
We often hear about the need for criminal justice reform. What does that actually look like in practice?
It means looking beyond those punitive measures and investing in programs that address the root causes of crime, providing educational opportunities, job training, mental health services within the prison system, creating pathways for individuals to re-enter society as productive and contributing members.
It's about recognizing that people can change, that even those who have committed terrible acts can be rehabilitated and contribute positively to society.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of their past mistakes.
This case has really challenged me to think about the complexities of justice, the interplay of individual choices and societal influences, and the importance of a multifaceted approach to preventing violence.
It's a reminder that while we can't undo the past, we can certainly learn from it. We can honor the memory of Tanji, Tamika, and Mishan by working towards a future where such tragedies are less likely to occur.
I think that's a powerful message to leave our listeners with. This deep dive hasn't just been about dissecting a crime. It's been about exploring the human condition, confronting difficult truths, and ultimately searching for solutions.
It's been a privilege to share this journey with you and our listeners. And while the issues we've discussed are complex and multifaceted, I remain hopeful. Because the very act of engaging in these conversations, of seeking understanding, of challenging our assumptions, that's where progress begins.
Well, thank you for your insights. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this episode has sparked some important conversations and inspired you to think critically about the world around you. Remember, even in the face of darkness, there is always hope. Stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.